1, 2, 1, 2, go.
Welcome to Tourism Talk. I'm Laura Schomburg, Marketing Director at the Paducah Convention and Visitors Bureau. Today's guests, for many of our viewers, will need no introduction. They're well-connected, talented musicians, historians, and representatives of Paducah's music scene, both locally and around the world. J.D. Wilkes and Nathan Blake Lynn are here with me today to bring light to our city's deep musical heritage and the creative energy it inspires today. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen.
Thanks, Laura.
You're welcome. I guess to sort of, for those viewers that don't know you all yet, rather than me trying to introduce you all and all of your credentials, why don't you all tell a little bit about your background and how you got involved in Paducah's music scene?
Well, I grew up in Granville, not far from here, and grew up in the Baptist church. My father was a music director, and my sister was a singer. My uncle played country guitar, and so I grew up around music. Went to Heath High School and sang, and then went off to college and kind of got deeper into music. And then I took a job at Land Between the Lakes, working for the Home Place, and got into old-time music more. And after that, decided to try to pursue a career in music, and I did that for a good number of years. I guess I still am. And I also work at the McCracken County Public Library in the local and family history department, so that has helped continue my education in local music history, I guess you could say.
Great. Thanks, Nathan.
I'm J.D. Wilkes, and my parents are from this area. I was born in Texas, though, and my dad's line of work kept us moving around a lot. Lived in Louisiana for a while, and first heard roots music down there in Cajun music and blues, and really got into rootsy American music from where I lived and listening to the radio. My parents aren't necessarily musicians. My mom is a piano teacher, but it's mostly gospel music that I grew up listening to in the church, Baptist church, and it all seemed to fit together and seemed to awaken a passion in me, just being privy to all that culture. And on my own, I sort of taught myself how to play harmonica and recently banjo, and been delving more into blues and bluegrass and the roots of American music. And I wrote a book about barn dances in Kentucky, and so I'm branching out in what I do as far as music goes.
Yeah. I think, like both of you all just mentioned, you've kind of become students of the music culture here in Kentucky, and far western Kentucky especially. But you didn't mention any of your present day kind of affiliations. Tell us some of the bands and groups that you've been involved with as well.
Well, I performed with the band Bon and the Mash, and still do. We've been together over 10 years now. We started as a string band and kind of progressed into an act where we like to be able to play all kinds of American roots music, like J.D. was speaking of. I also perform with the Solid Rocket Boosters, which J.D. can say more about probably, as well as the Wheelhouse Rousters, which is a band that Josh Coffey and Eddie Coffey and myself started a number of years ago to draw awareness to the roustabout music from Paducah, Kentucky. So we've been doing that for a while. And I also am a songwriter and have pursued numerous solo endeavors over the years and continue to do that. So
That's great. And J.D.?
Well, like 25 years ago, I started a band with Lane Hendrickson called 61 South, which Lou Jatan now fronts that. A little bit later, started a group called the Solid Rocket Boosters with Nathan Brown down in Murray, and we were a rockabilly band exploring that kind of music. And the Shack Shakers is the group I'm with now that I started around the same time, about 20 years ago. And we've been traveling the world and playing coast to coast and going up into Canada, playing sort of a up-tempo version of rockabilly and blues. And here recently, the Dirt Daubers is a band I started with my wife, Jessica. And so I have a musical ADD, I guess, jumping around and starting bands and spinning plates, you know.
Some very successful groups that you've both been involved in. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about those as we go along, but I guess just to get started, how would you all describe Paducah's music scene?
Thriving.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have a long history of great music, whether it be gospel or R&B or blues or bluegrass. There's so much diversity here in music, and it's been happening for years. And I think over the last, I can speak for the last 35 years, I've seen a resurgence in people wanting to get back to the more local aspects of music, what they can give to their community. We have so much stimulation through television and through the internet and your cell phone that to me it seems now that people are wanting to get out and see live local music more, and hope that we can continue that. JD?
Yeah. It's got a great scene, it always has. As I was writing the book, I was learning all about the old radio broadcasts where bands would come and play WPAD and put in a year or two, and all these old great hillbilly bands and fiddle players and the riverboat music. And then you fast forward into present time, and it's still going on, and that regionalism that you got in the old days is sort of coming back again. Writing songs about your hometown and the folklore in the lyrics and the regional identity that's just built into a lot of these groups. It's great, and it gives people a deeper sense of where they're from, and you know, a connectedness to the community through the music, and it feels like an old time communal get together whenever people come out to see bands. It's not just rock stars on stage, you know, serving their ego. It's for the community, and that's the difference in our scene. Because you go to other cities and towns, and it seems to be more about glamour and the trends of the day. But we have sort of a consistency in the regional aspect that goes from band to band, and everybody loves writing about Paducah and all the cool history, and I think it's neat.
Yeah, and that authenticity, I think, is what makes a visitor experience of our music. I know when both of you all perform, I feel like you're great ambassadors for our city and telling what this place is truly about and what does differentiate Paducah. So I wanted to do this episode for a long time, and I thank you all for kind of giving some of that background. I guess talk a little bit more about that heritage. Paducah's location along the rivers within Kentucky has created some unique opportunities and kind of exchanges of culture. Would one of you all want to speak to that?
Well, Western Kentucky in general kind of gets the shaft in the history books, and but it's where Travis-style guitar picking came out of. It's where bluegrass was born. It wasn't Eastern Kentucky, no offense, you know. Mountain music is definitely a part of it, but you get rockabilly coming up and jazz coming up the Mississippi River, sort of flowing backwards, you know, with the river traffic and embedding itself in the culture here because of the proximity to the rivers. So many rivers, more coastline than Florida, and then also coming down the rivers or via railroad, the mountain music from Eastern Kentucky. So we're like in the epicenter of all this culture. This cross-cultural dynamic happens right here. It's like the crosshairs are right on Western Kentucky. Paducah, of course, he could speak more on the roustabout stuff in the Mary Wheeler collection, which I think is important.
Yeah. As JD was saying, with the Rivers bringing different styles of music here, we are literally a confluence, as JD was talking about. And the former roustabouts that worked on the packet boats, they would travel up and down the Ohio, Mississippi, Tennessee, Cumberland, Illinois, Missouri, all these rivers, and they would pick up all these different styles of music. And they wrote labor songs through this. They might pick up a line here at Natchez, one in even Owensboro, let's say, and they would sing these lines as ways to lighten their workload. And in the 1930s, Mary Wheeler, a Paducah musicologist, went out and she started interviewing these former roustabouts, and she wrote down all of their songs. And it's a great collection of Western Kentucky folk music that the McCracken County Library has, and it really says a lot about what we're discussing here, because you get a cross of lyrics. With old-time music from the mountains, there'll be a certain line that you can find in the roustabout songs as well. So you might have heard a folk song that, say, Doc Watson made famous, or Elizabeth Cotton or someone. And you can go to the roustabout songs and find that same line. So, you know, music's repetition, and it's a great way for people to tell history. And through the roustabout songs, we have a great glimpse of our musical heritage here, because not only you have Delta blues in there, you have jazz, you have gospel numbers, you have love songs, you have all of this combined into this one collection. And I encourage everyone to stop by the library and see what we have.
Mary Wheeler was the local folklorist that went and would go down to the rivers and hear them singing, and she'd keep the melody and the words in her head and run home to her piano and write it all out. So it's recorded before tape recorders. So I think, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Alan Lomax, a great field recorder, he wrote Mary a letter in the 30s saying, "Why don't you let us send you a field recorder?" And she had already gone out and collected all this music, so we don't have any recordings of the roustabouts singing these songs, but we have all her notation. And she did exactly what JD said. She would go out and interview these roustabouts, write down the lyrics and keep the melody in her head, and go home to her house on Kentucky Avenue and 5th and write the notation out. So,
and his band, the Wheelhouse Rousters, are, I think, the only band I can think of that actually has tapped into this untapped source of folk music. I mean, it's really like sea shanties of the mainland, and no one has recorded these, really put the time and energy into reviving those songs that I can think of. You know, it's the last frontier of American folk music, and this guy here, he's the one really championing that.
And what a special place for that to happen. Paducah at the heart of all those inland waterways coming together. And it really, I think what you are doing is a very special thing. Talk about maybe the recording that you all did, overlooking the rivers. And
yeah, we recorded, first, a couple things happened. I took a job at the McCracken County Library, and we were aware of the Mary Wheeler collection because JD and I grew up listening and hanging out with a guy named Wheeler Underwood, who's a Paducah legend in the music scene. And Mary was his aunt. And so Wheeler and a couple of his friends had helped put an album out that Mary Wheeler's niece, Bertha, had recorded of the roustabout songs. So we were aware of it. When I started at the library, I found this collection again, and we started doing a full session of it and scanning all the pages and putting it on our digital collection, which is online for people to see at home. You can get on the internet and view these things at the McCracken County Public Library's website. So at the same time, I said we should probably record some of these songs as well. So we started working out our arrangements, and granted, we are three middle-class white men, and we are not hard-working black men from the packet boat era. So what we do is not completely authentic, but it's our representation, and it's more to draw awareness to this great culture that is quickly being forgotten.
But you've worked your share of paddle wheelers playing over the years.
Remember
I used to play on the Paducah Jubilee, best money ever made, I tell you what. And then what are the boats you were on?
We played the River Barge Explorer, we played the American Queen, the Mississippi Queen.
Queen of the Mississippi?
Yeah, Belle Louisville, and then I guess the highlight was we got to play on the Delta Queen the last time it rode from Paducah to Cairo.
Wow.
Before it was docked, and now it's back, working on being back.
So hopefully you'll be back on it, telling these these river stories.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great representation of Paducah, obviously, and something that is very authentic to us. As we're talking about all these things that are happening here, I can't help but think our viewers may be wondering, how can we be part of this? How can we experience this music? And I think obviously you all have recordings and that sort of thing, but there's some great events and performing venues here in the city that you all can probably profile better than I can. Music at Mac has become a really exciting place to see live music. I think you were part of the very first event there.
Bon the Mash and Pokey Lafarge played there, and then it's kind of skyrocketed since then. JD's done a lot with the Mac, helping get national touring artists in. He's done a good job helping with that and keeping that alive. And there's music at Mac every other week, you think?
I think so.
Yeah.
The Maiden Alley.
And well, I know more about the little jamborees that are kind of like not on the internet.
Right.
You got to go digging for them. And well, we just went to one down in Casey, Kentucky the other day, in an old high school, and these are kind of like in keeping with the old barn dances when people would play music just for the fun of it, to blow off steam after a hard work week. So it's the legacy of that continues on. Of course, there's the Kentucky Opry. There's the music they have here. Boy, I mean, do they still do the music downtown?
Yeah, we have gazebo music downtown. I think lately downtown has really, the clubs there, or restaurants have started supporting local music more. So between Doe's Eat Place and JP's and Shandy's, all these restaurants, Max's, you can usually find live music. And then the city and the Parks Department have done a great job of recognizing local music as professional artists and getting them out there into the public, whether it be at the gazebo or the farmer's market on Saturdays. We have a great Thursday evening program right now. On Thursdays, right at 6 o'clock during the summertime, the parks are hosting both local and national touring acts. Then Fridays at 5 at the Carson Center. There's a lot of great places that you can catch music here in Paducah.
There's the music barn at the flea market in Reedland. Have you been in there?
I haven't
It's like
yet.
stepping into like a Texas boot scoot. Cowboy hats and two-stepping, and there's a band with like the Grand Ole Opry barn behind them. I mean, that's been going on there for 2 years, and it seems to be getting bigger and stronger. And this is switching gears pretty hard, but you know, there's a pretty good punk rock scene in Paducah too, and that's kind of how I got into it, because punk rock is, you know, kids getting involved, you know, with a lot of energy and making music, whether they know how to play it or not, you know. And Wheeler Underwood, we talked about earlier, he's like the grandfather of that scene. And Nathan Brown, Playful 8, you know, it just goes on and on and on.
And there's a lot of hall shows if you're into punk rock music. Hi-Fi Ninjas out there doing that a lot. So
Yeah.
you can find that on the internet as well. There's a lot of Paducah music, and we have a great gospel music scene here too. If you like gospel music, there's plenty of that for you as well, I think.
And on our website, the Visitors Bureau website, we try to keep track of the events that are happening and at least the venues. And with a new website, we'll have this great nightlife section that talks about the music scene, because, you know, people may be thinking Paducah music scene, but there really is always ways and opportunities to really experience this quality and diversity that you all are talking about. And a lot of the series that you talked about kind of pair some national artists with local artists like yourselves, and kind of adding value to these venues and bringing new audiences in, hopefully through both the local scene and those national artists. Something that I thought of as you were talking, JD, the square dance that we had here in Paducah, which got some international attention.
Yeah, it did. Excuse me. The BBC got a hold of my manager. I have a manager, and
It's not me.
They told me that they were making a documentary on Southern music, and it was like a mini series over in England. So they were like starting in New Orleans and going up Memphis, and they knew that I'd written this book, and they were looking for some ideas for places to go and shoot. And of course, I had to bring them to Paducah, and it just so happened to time out perfectly with the square dance I was putting on anyway. So we had all the BBC cameras in at the Elks Lodge downtown, and they did a whole piece on square dancing and Paducah, and had some great establishing shots of the flood wall and the city limit sign and all this great stuff. It came out really good, and it was neat to see it, in this professional way, really slick BBC production, and they went easy on us. They didn't portray us as hicks, It was they did a good job. And we're doing another square dance July 3rd, if anyone's interested. It'll be at the Coke plant.
Very good. And the Coke plant has become a great new venue, with the brewery there, and then in the rotunda, a great kind of the opposite end of downtown, bringing some music to our community.
I welcome all that. I hope that they can revive a lot more of these old buildings, and I hope more people move to Paducah. I know there's a mass influx or outflux, whatever the word is, of people leaving California and going to Nashville, but I hope they discover Paducah as a destination too, because they bring a lot of energy and ideas and money, and I think that's what we need to revive the culture here. Because ever since, I guess when the mall went in, downtown kind of went kaput, but we need to get that going again, because it's buildings are too cool to be empty.
And it's great to see as downtown does kind of start expanding further past the river, and more buildings get occupied and have new purpose. And I think part of Paducah being named a UNESCO Creative City, it recognizes that our city is full of people like yourselves, artists, musicians, that are being innovative and trying to celebrate this authentic culture that we have and engage people in it. And as Paducah and Kentucky, sort of as people headed west, the original pioneers, Kentucky is still a great place to kind of be a pioneer and help develop the culture. And I think Paducah especially has a lot of really positive energy right now.
It seems like it, something happening, you can tell.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think JD has done a great job over the years with the Shack Shakers of taking Paducah and its culture all across the world, really. And I think that's something that a lot of the musicians share here, is the music that we make is really just drawing attention to this great place that we live in, and the culture here. JD's represented overseas. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, we did the UNESCO thing, didn't we?
Yes.
Let's see. Was that last year?
I guess it has been about a year.
Well, the Dirt Daubers, the band I have with my wife, we were going over to Ireland anyway, doing a little tour over there, and y'all set me up with a little quilt to take over to the mayor, and with some books and things,
Yeah.
because Dublin is a city of literature.
Yes.
With UNESCO. And do people know what UNESCO is?
Yeah, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and
Right.
Cultural
So,
Organization.
kind of like a sister city thing, but not. And but I got to meet the deputy Lord Mayor, Gerard Mannix Flynn, who himself was sort of a kind of a punk rock kind of guy, but he's a politician too. He was had tattoos on his hands and everything, but he's dressed up like a dignitary. And we met, had coffee, had a photo shoot there in this amazing, what used to be the old Parliament building in Dublin. And it was one of the most amazing buildings I'd ever been in. So anyway, and then I went to an old time jam there in a pub right afterwards. And that night when we played the gig, there was the deputy Lord Mayor out there in the mosh pit.
That is great.
It was pretty cool.
I think that was a great example to show the connectedness, because they were a city of literature, we're a city of craft and folk art, but you were able to connect with your new book and talk
Right.
about some of that shared heritage with
Yeah.
Ireland.
He said the quilting started over there in Ireland. So I'm sure it was happening in lots of
Right.
places, but he claimed credit that Ireland and the pattern that you had given me in the quilt to present to him, I believe was of an Irish design. So he
Great.
appreciated that too.
Yeah, and that created some good publicity for Paducah and for yourself. Bloomberg Business Week and some other outlets covered that. So really great to see Paducah's music scene be recognized locally and around the world. And we thank you all for all you do to be ambassadors for Paducah, and we encourage all of our viewers, whether they're from Paducah or from Dublin, to get to know Paducah's music scene, look us up, and understand what we're all about. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on Tourism Talk.
1, 2, go. Hello, ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Hello, ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba. Ba-da-ba-ba